here, I want to get into Venezuela right now because Defense Secretary and Trump administration DUI hire Pete Hegseth has announced Operation Southern Spear, which means the USS Gerald Ford is now in the zone of operation in the Caribbean. This is the largest U.S. aircraft carrier, and it's joining an entire battle fleet with nuclear submarines, destroyers. B-52s are able to launch from Puerto Rico, and there are drills taking place in Trinidad and Tobago. And here's Lindsey Graham attempting to sell the war to the American public. This is basically how the war is being sold to the American public. And I guess I have to zoom in here.
Yes, you do.
I have to zoom in to see it myself. Should I do it in Lindsey Graham's voice? This is Lindsey Graham. Let me have a glass of rosé real quick. That is absolutely zesty. To those who wonder about what's going on in Venezuela, you should understand President Trump is deadly serious about stopping the narco-terrorist state of Venezuela from continuing to poison Americans with illegal drugs. President Trump also believes Maduro is an illegitimate leader. It sounds like one of his staffers wrote this. Is an illegitimate leader whose days are numbered. I agree with President Trump's assessment of the situation in Venezuela. I do not consider Maduro a legitimate leader, but rather a drug trafficker who has been indicted in U.S. courts. Bush 41 took Panamanian leader Noriega down under similar circumstances. There is a drug caliphate in our backyard that includes Venezuela, Colombia, and Cuba. I'm very glad President Trump is dedicated to ending this reign of terror. The sooner Maduro leaves, the better for the people of Venezuela and the United States. That is America first. And according to Reuters Ipsos poll that came out today, 21% of the American public supports Lindsey Graham on a U.S. military intervention in Venezuela. 21%. I didn't know that there were that many gusanos, escualidos, and defense contractors in America. That's a large number. But it's actually a very small minority of Americans who support Lindsey Graham there. And the lie is drugs, the war on drugs. But notice how he slips in the word caliphate, drug caliphate. That's because they're going to try to claim that Venezuela has Hezbollah cells and Iranian support inside its territory, and that it actually threatens America when most Americans are done with it. They're not believing the WMD lies. They know that Venezuela poses no threat to the U.S., and this is about oil and contracts and plunder and neocolonialism and crushing independent government that doesn't take marching orders from the U.S. regime. But the lie is cartels, that Nicolas Maduro commands a drug cartel, that he is a narco-terrorist, and that he's using drugs as a form of terror, like this, the fentanyl coming into the United States is being sent by Maduro. And he is said to be the head of the Cartel of the Suns. That's the designation that was issued by the Department of Justice under former CIA operative William Barr, who was Attorney General in the first Trump term, to put a bounty over the head of Nicolas Maduro for $15 million. It's now $50 million now, or 25, or I think it's 50.
Yeah, they doubled it.
Yeah. The Cartel of the Suns does not exist. It's such a gigantic lie. Why hasn't there been like any, it doesn't seem like mainstream media, like the Washington Post, New York Times, they don't seem that excited about this war as they have in the past, although they've helped vilify Venezuela and vilify the Bolivarian revolution in Venezuela and kind of created momentum for this war. They don't seem that excited about it. But none of them have invested any journalistic energy into exploring the lies that are underpinning this intervention. And the big lie is the cartel of the Suns, which, I mean, we've exposed it before. We've talked about this before, but I just want to just keep highlighting this.
Bring it on screen.
According to what the former head of the Drug Enforcement Administration told Mike Wallace, this drug shipment got here courtesy of what he calls drug trafficking by the CIA in partnership with the Venezuelan National Guard. While rumors of CIA involvement in drug trafficking have circulated for years, no one in the U.S. government has ever before publicly charged the CIA with this kind of wrongdoing. And it's not the kind of accusation anyone in government would make without thinking long and hard.
Let me understand what you're saying. A ton of cocaine was smuggled into the United States of America by the Venezuelan National Guard?
Well,
in cooperation with the CIA?
That's exactly what appears to have happened.
Until last month, Judge Robert Bonner was the head of the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA. And Judge Bonner explained to us that only the head of the DEA is authorized to approve the transportation of any illegal narcotics like cocaine into this country, even if the CIA is bringing it in.
Let me put it this way, Mike. If this has not been approved by DEA or an appropriate law enforcement authority in the United States, then it's illegal. It's called drug trafficking. It's called drug smuggling.
So what you're saying, in effect, is the CIA broke the law. Simple as that.
I don't think there's any other way you can rationalize around it, assuming, as I think we can, that there was some knowledge on the part of CIA, at least some participation in approving or condoning this to be done.
Judge Bonner says he came to that conclusion after a 2-year secret investigation conducted by the DEA's Office of Professional Responsibility in cooperation with the CIA's own Inspector General. And what reason did the CIA have for promoting this drug smuggling?
Well, the only rationale that's ever been offered is that this would lead to some valuable drug intelligence about the Colombian cartels.
Over half of the Colombian drug cartel's cocaine crosses the border with Venezuela on its way to the United States and Europe. Back in the 1980s, the CIA was mandated by then-President Reagan to develop intelligence on the Colombian drug cartels. And so the CIA, with Venezuela's Guardia Nacional, or National Guard, set up an undercover operation, a drug smuggling operation in Venezuela that could handle the transshipment of the Colombian cartel's cocaine on its way to market. The plan was to infiltrate the cartel, and it worked. For the CIA National Guard undercover operation quickly accumulated this cocaine, over 1.5 tons, that was smuggled from Colombia into Venezuela inside these trucks, and then was stored here at the CIA-financed Counter-Narcotics Intelligence Center in Caracas. The center's commander and the CIA's man in Venezuela was National Guard General Ramon Guillen Davila.
I tried to work together with them.
All right, well, it goes on for a while. Ramon Guillen Davila, let's go back there real quick. Hold on.
The center's commander...
You see, this is Ramon Guillen Davila, and he's wearing a patch that has a sun on it on one of his arms. That was the symbol, something that officers in the Venezuelan National Guard wore. This is all before Hugo Chavez. This is before Chavez came into power. This is under the pro-U.S. government before Chavez. This report, I think, is from 1993 by Mike Wallace, when 60 Minutes sometimes reported on the CIA, not on behalf of the CIA. Guillen was the main CIA asset in the Venezuelan National Guard, and they created this cartel in order to ship drugs into the United States, supposedly for intelligence purposes. And they gave the name Cartel of the Suns to this cartel simply because of the patches that these pre-Chavez National Guard members wore. So the whole Cartel of the Suns thing is, it's something that was created by the CIA to poison America. I mean, where did that 22 tons of cocaine they shipped into the U.S. go? It went up the noses of Americans. And now it's just been rehabilitated in order to target Venezuela so that they could justify potential decapitation strikes against Nicolas Maduro, to just like kill their leaders, pull a Noriega operation. So it's a gigantic lie. It's a WMD level lie that actually, if the US media would tell the truth, would remind Americans how the CIA poisoned our own society in the 80s and 90s.
Well, that's what I wanted to say about this, is that this does speak to how much sort of contempt the Trump administration people have for the media, or at least how easily they feel that they can dupe the media, because they're so lazy with this propaganda that they're recycling a cartel that the CIA used to work with to now push this regime change campaign against Maduro by falsely claiming he's the head of that cartel, and they can trust that the U.S. media just won't fact check them on it. Like you have, and you even brought up a a clip from like the most like reputable journalistic institution there is, 60 Minutes, or at least what it used to be, and yet still this doesn't penetrate. Right, a mass audience has not seen this and doesn't know this. There was reporting on the fact that Tulsi Gabbard basically ousted intelligence analysts who contradicted the Trump administration's claims, right? I mean, that's been reported.
Yeah, this is on the other big lie, which is that Maduro controls a criminal gang called Tren de Aragua and has used migrants to invade the United States in order to attack America through a migrant wave. When we all know the migrant waves were created by U.S. sanctions to destroy Venezuela's oil sector, which impoverished the population of Venezuela.
Yeah.
And according to a declassified U.S. intelligence report from this April, the Maduro has no control over Tren de Aragua. In fact, he basically neutralized it with his own security forces in Venezuela. So what does Tulsi Gabbard do? She fires the 2 intelligence officers who issued that report in order to keep the lie going so that Trump can enact the Alien Insurrection Act to carry out mass deportations, but also to justify a military assault on Venezuela that Tulsi Gabbard used to oppose very publicly.
Yeah.
And which made her kind of unique.
Yeah. Yeah. And in fact,
Wild.
Trump used those credentials that Tulsi Gabbard has for being anti-war, anti-regime change, anti-politicizing intelligence from Iraq to Syria to help get elected. And then how does he repay the favor? He goes and basically presides over a new deception, a new regime change deception, and gets uses the credibility that she had built up among some sectors to push that.
Yeah, and I mean, I should probably do like a whole piece about this, but this administration and the people around it, they've been mobbed up with narco governments for years and years. I mean, this is Lindsey Graham with look at Lindsey Graham's face. He's like, look at this little man right here.
Oh, the good old days.
He's surround
Joe Lieberman.
Yeah, it's like the 3-headed hydra of neocons. Joe Mentum, Joe Lieberman, John McCain, and Lindsey Graham. And they're welcoming Alvaro Uribe of Colombia, the Colombian president, to the United States, Mr. Plan Colombia. Alvaro Uribe was like basically a drug lord in presidential guise. And the U.S. loved him because he partnered with right-wing paramilitaries to crush the FARC and to crush peasant rebellions and to crush urban leftists. And he was, early on, he was the head of the aviation authority. And as the head of the aviation authority, he was authorizing flights for Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel. His predecessor had been killed for attempting to stop the flights. And then when the, I believe, interior minister came in and attempted to stop the flights, he was killed. Alvaro Uribe somehow survived his tenure as aviation minister. He served 2 terms, and then they brought in Ivan Duque, who is basically Uribe's proxy to serve his 3rd term. And Uribe was mobbed up with all sorts of Colombian gangsters. And it's Duque was very close to Rubio. Uribe is very close to Rubio. They love this guy. He was sort of the linchpin of the American program in Colombia. It's why I think it was Hugo Chavez. He referred to Colombia as the Israel of South America. And I mean, this was actually something that came out in a defense intelligence agency analysis of top drug traffickers in Colombia, that in 1991, Uribe was listed among important Colombian narco traffickers. It just goes on and on. Marco Rubio, he helped prop up Juan Orlando Hernandez from Honduras, who's now in a federal prison for life in Florida for drug trafficking. He was the president of Honduras who led the coup regime after the U.S. helped stage a military coup against Jose Manuel Zelaya, the rightfully elected president of Honduras, and basically installed a de facto narco dictatorship. Look for all the pictures of Marco Rubio hanging out with Juan Orlando Hernandez, propping him up the same way he props up. Man, my brain just glitched. Well, he props up Daniel Noboa in Ecuador. Yeah. Daniel Noboa, head of the shipping company of Bonita Fruit of Noboa, of the Noboa shipping company. He was head of shipping. There are constant headlines about cocaine being shipped in Bonita banana crates to Europe, to the United States. Most of the cocaine and fentanyl, but mainly cocaine that's coming into the US comes from the Pacific through Ecuador. Ecuador's been overrun by narco cartels. The society's been destabilized. And Rubio's very close to Noboa, who is a Miami-born billionaire. And then you got Bukele in El Salvador, close friends with Rubio. Rubio's tight with Bukele. And a lot of Venezuelan opposition figures who are clamoring for war for a U.S. war on Venezuela, who we exposed, Wyatt Reed and I, in our new investigation about the 2020 mercenary coup in Venezuela. They're advising Bukele. But here's the crazy thing about Bukele. He's been credited as this hero of the drug war who's crushed Mara Salchucha, MS-13 in El Salvador. Okay, do you remember when the Venezuelan migrants, several plane loads, were sent to CICOT, the Supermax torture center in El Salvador, and they were publicly humiliated by Salvadoran riot police on their way into that prison when Venezuela was seeking their return, repatriations directly to Venezuela? That was part of a deal where basically the Trump administration paid Bukele to take in those Venezuelans to create a sadistic display for the MAGA base. And in exchange, Bukele got MS-13 top figures sent back from the United States where they had been turned into informants that the DEA and the Department of Justice were using to crack down on cartel networks and gangs inside the United States. So Trump threw the Department of Justice under the bus in order to appease Bukele. And why did Bukele want those MS-13 figures to come back to El Salvador? I mean, they were already in U.S. prisons. They were helping U.S. intelligence and law enforcement. Why did he want them? Because he had cut secret deals with them. He was actually colluding with MS-13. This is just a well-established fact. And he wanted to make sure that they would be silenced in his CICOT prison, that no one would ever hear from them again. So he got them back, and they didn't squeal about their partnership with Bukele. It goes on and on. Marco Rubio, we don't call him Narco Rubio for nothing. I mean, this has been, if you follow like even Spanish language corporate media, it's a matter of public record that Marco Rubio was living in the home of his brother-in-law, Orlando Cecilio, the brother of his wife, Barbara Rubio, in Miami when Orlando Cecilio was one of the cocaine cowboys in Miami. He was busted for trafficking in tons of cocaine. He was asked about it on Univision.
Y entonces se entera que Orlando Sicilia, el esposo de su hermana Bárbara, había sido arrestado y acusado de algún delito relacionado con drogas, según usted escribe en el libro. Y luego su cuñado sería condenado a 25 años de prisión. Eso es exactamente lo mismo que nosotros dijimos en Univision. Entiendo que eso le haya molestado a usted y a su...
He's asking Rubio about it while he was a presidential candidate and saying, you know, this has been, that Univision has already reported on this.
Su familia, lo entiendo perfectamente, pero la pregunta es, como periodistas y los votantes no tienen el derecho de saber qué tipo de relación tenía usted con alguien vinculado al narcotráfico. Realmente la historia fue...
We have the right, he's saying like the voters and journalists have a right to know about someone who is linked to drug traffic, that you're linked to, who is a drug trafficker. And Rubio
sobre
gets
mí,
so
me habían
angry.
contactado a mí primero.
Usted
Pero
tiene 16
trataron de...
años, ¿no?
Sí, pero
And
déjame...
he's saying you should have talked to me first.
Mira, perdóname, Jorge.
Like he feels like he's being
toda esta
ambushed.
serie de cosas, pero va más allá de eso. Después, en primera plana del noticiero nacional de Univisión, entiendo que usted no estuvo en el aire esa noche, pero en primera plana del noticiero de Univisión nacional pusieron la historia que no se trataba sobre mí, era la historia personal de dos ciudadanos privados que no tienen...
So you can see Rubio's just freaking out about being asked about this. He should be asked about it now that the drug war is front and center. I mean, I can't think of a less credible gang of figures to be waging this war. And look at who's going to come into power. It's going to be a literal corporate whore. I mean, I don't use that term just as a way of denigrating Maria Corina Machado, but because of what she's saying. She's basically declaring before a Miami business conference at the Adam Smith Center for Economic Freedom, which is where Juan Guaido is a professor, that she's going to whore out Venezuela to multinational corporations if she rides to power on the back of a tank.
$1.7 trillion opportunity, not only in oil and gas, which is huge, and you know that the opportunities, because we will open all upstream, middle stream, downstream to all companies, but also in mining, in gold, in infrastructure, power. We have our grid right now has a 17 gigawatt opportunity of energy potential that needs to be rehabbed, certainly for technology and AI.
She looks crazy. She looks like a wild-eyed concierge for everyone who wants to loot Venezuela. And that's what this is about, along with crushing a revolutionary movement that you can call it, you know, people call it socialist. There are definitely strong socialist currents in Chavismo, in the Bolivarian Revolution, for sure. But at its base, it's also just nationalism. It's about a people reclaiming their own resources for their own benefit. And they've been financially assaulted by US sanctions and now the US military for trying to do so. That's what this is about. There are US troops in Trinidad, miles from Venezuela right now. Trinidadian fishermen are hearing drones overhead. I think we're on the eve of war. And you're not hearing enough and seeing enough pushback against this. There aren't protests. There's not much of a public debate. A Senate resolution to denounce US military action inside Venezuela was shot down. 51 Republicans voted against it. That's it.
And now Trump has sent this massive aircraft carrier, the Gerald Ford, into the region. And look, I'm not sure what is in Trump's head, what he wants to do, but clearly that Lindsey Graham post that you put up before, that's Lindsey Graham's effort to just keep people on board and to try to convince the MAGA base that this is a good thing to go ahead with regime change in Venezuela. And I guess, what was the aim of all this? Like, you know, Trump openly admitting that, yes, I've authorized CIA covert operations. It's not like the New York Times reported that. It's not as if they did this in some like grand scoop. It's because the Trump administration wanted them to report this. So there's a psyop going on here where they're trying to foment destabilization of Venezuela, get the government to collapse from within. That's not happening. So then what is the next step?
I mean, they thought maybe, you know, as the U.S. military did in 1964 with Brazil, that they would spur a kind of right-wing counter-revolution in the streets and a military coup by bringing the military to the shores of Venezuela. That doesn't seem to be working either. And now that's why Lindsey Graham brought up the Noriega option to actually go in and kidnap Nicolas Maduro, which would be pretty difficult to do considering the multi-layered defenses of Caracas. I mean, Caracas does have air defenses surrounding it. It does have layers of military defense, as well as the popular mobilization of the colectivos. So unless everybody just folds, I don't think that's going to happen either. And what we would see is a bloodbath. But I don't talk to anyone inside Venezuela or out who doesn't think the U.S. will just walk away without doing something with this massive buildup.
Yeah, exactly. Because if Trump backs down, then he doesn't look like a tough guy, which is all he cares about.